Hi everyone, my name is Ezekiel Ward. I've been the Chief Compliance Officer at a number of multinationals, and I now advise companies on how to build and refresh ethics and compliance programs. Today we're going to be talking about compliance data in the boardroom. After listening to this masterclass, you should be convinced that there are some fantastic ways that you can engage the board of directors and executive management using data. We can all drown in data, there's just so much of it, and there are newer forms of collection, automation, and analytics constantly evolving. But only some data is useful, and the way that you use it as a compliance professional in the boardroom will directly impact the success of your program. Before we dive into the boardroom, let's revisit why we go to the board in the first place. As executives, we go into the board to keep its members informed of what is happening in and around the company. Board members give advice and make decisions based on this information. They can also check whether their past decisions have been acted on. Compliance officers can use boardroom discussions for three main things. Number one, to get advice and guidance on the best way forward. Number two, to demonstrate that action is required. And number three, to secure oversight of management. In each of these, advice, action, and oversight, data is key. It can help you to communicate with clarity and to influence outcomes. So, we know why we're going into the board. Let's look at how we create the right environment for using data in the boardroom. Firstly, don't assume that the board wants a lot of data. They may only be interested in a couple of metrics, or they might want data only in pre-reading materials. I've worked with boards that wanted pictures and diagrams, and others that wanted short one-page memos. There are all sorts of styles, and each has its own merits and weaknesses. Feel free to open up a discussion with the board, or perhaps just the chairperson. What do they want? What format do they want it in? And how often? I think boards welcome the opportunity to provide feedback on what pre-reads you provide, what in-meeting materials you'll present, and, crucially, how much time you're going to need. I'd advise having this conversation carefully, but as soon as possible, as it will set the tone for your relationship with the board. If there's an appetite for data amongst board members, make sure you're in a position to capture it adequately. Set up your systems and your organization to ensure you capture the data you need. If this isn't possible, you need to flag it to your board as soon as you can. Don't let them feel that you're not delivering key metrics or information if it's actually not possible to come by. It's really important that you align your data to the board's decision-making. For example, I've always completed risk assessments in September. Why? Because I need to start arguing my case for actions and KPIs already in the Q3 or October board meeting. That allowed the board to integrate risk-based plans into the following calendar year. Finally, on the topic of how we create the right environment for using data in the boardroom, do remember that the way in which the board uses data will evolve over time. Create room for adjustments as board members rotate, especially if key positions change, such as the audit committee chair. Let's move on to look at some examples of data you might use in the boardroom. Given how senior and experienced many boards are, a favorite dataset that I like to use is a regulatory update. It's important to talk through any new or changed laws, regulations, or compliance cases in the public domain. Find an effective way of presenting them. Maybe a graph showing potential impact on your company on the x-axis and your level of preparedness on the y-axis. This simple data visualization is easy to understand, it's easy to discuss, and easy to act on. Benchmarking is a dataset that every board I've worked with has requested. This is often overlooked, but benchmarking is incredibly useful information. My best advice is to find the benchmarks that work for your board and for your program. They should be relevant to your industry and the countries where you operate. Some examples of good benchmark data points might be the size of the ethics and compliance team, the annual spend, or the number of compliance cases. You can get these numbers from public surveys or from proprietary providers. However, I've always found informal and formal networks of compliance officers a great source of benchmarks. Investigations are a crucial data set and one you'll already be spending significant time on with your board. Aside from the standard metrics that many of us use, I advise CCOs to present data to their boards on remediation measures or open items. You should do so until the actions are fully closed. This is a great way of maintaining oversight of management even after issues have been investigated. Where you can, develop a system to track near misses, just like safety teams do. Usually this would be data about guidance requests you've received or cases that turned out to be not too serious. This can complement the main investigations data and be useful input for risk assessments. Finally, on investigations, help the board out by contextualizing the operation. Next to each case, I like to set out the revenues and margins of the units involved, their headcount, and key activities. This can be really helpful for the board who don't always know the business to the same level of detail as you do. It lets them know to what degree a unit actually matters and whether the risks they're taking match the benefits that a unit is bringing to the organization. For example, if you engage in an elevated risk of bribery for a margin of just a few $1,000s, you should probably reconsider those operations. Even culture and awareness can be broken down into tangible data. I've regularly run a risk leaders project that helps to gauge the compliance climate amongst senior employees. Usually, we take the top 50 or 100 leaders and run a simple survey with them on attitudes to ethics and compliance. I then sit down one-on-one with each leader to discuss their results and compare them to their peers. This is clear data that is useful, comparable, and actionable. It's also a great way to open up difficult conversations with senior leaders on sensitive compliance topics. To summarize, today we've looked at why we go into the boardroom, how to create a conducive environment for using data with the board, and what sorts of data you might use. There are all sorts of other data that we could spend many hours talking about here. Unfortunately, those will have to wait for another session. I want to thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.